what are some things about China that people don't understand, positive, just in the culture? What's some interesting things that you've learned about the Chinese?
Well, the sheer number of really smart, hardworking people in China is incredible. There are really, if you say like how many smart, hardworking people are there in China? There's far more of them there than there are here, I think, in my opinion. And they've got a lot of energy. So, I mean, the architecture in China that's in recent years is far more impressive than the U.S. I mean, the train stations, the buildings, the high-speed rail, everything. It's really far more impressive than what we have in the U.S. I mean, I recommend somebody just go to Shanghai and Beijing, look at the buildings, and go to, take the train from Beijing to Xi'an, where you have the terracotta warriors. China's got an incredible history, very long history. And, I think arguably in terms of the use of language from a written standpoint, sort of one of the oldest, perhaps the oldest written language. And in China, people did write things down. So now China historically has always been, with rare exception, been internally focused. They have not been acquisitive. They've fought each other. There have been many, many civil wars. In the Three Kingdoms War, I believe they lost about 70% of their population. So they've had brutal internal wars, like civil wars that make the U.S. Civil War look small by comparison. So I think it's important to appreciate that China is not monolithic. Mm-hmm. We sort of think of like China as this sort of one entity of one mind, and this is definitely not the case. From what I've seen, and I think most people who understand China would agree, that people in China think about China 10 times more than they think about anything outside of China. So it's like 90% of their consideration is, is internal. But the good news, the history of China suggests that China is not acquisitive, meaning they're not going to go out and invade a whole bunch of countries. Now China does feel very strongly about Taiwan. They've been very clear about that for a long time. From their standpoint, it would be like one of the states is not there like Hawaii or something like that, but more significant than Hawaii. And Hawaii is pretty significant for us. So they view it as really that there's a fundamental part of China, the island of Formosa, now Taiwan, that is not part of China but should be. And the only reason that it hasn't been is because of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. China has been very clear that they will incorporate Taiwan peacefully or militarily, but that they will incorporate it from their standpoint is 100% likely.
Well, like China's got a huge population collapse problem.
Really?
Yeah.
China, you actually get penalized if you have more than one kid.
No,
are you being serious?
No,
They
cut
that off.
No, see, this is like, so part of it is just like we're operating on things that were true in the past but are no longer true. So China did have a one-child policy, but like about 10 years ago, they changed it to a two-child policy. And then a few years ago, they changed it to a three-child policy, and birth rate kept plummeting the whole time. So they had the lowest birth rate ever last year.
Really?
Yeah, China's birth rate right now is 40% below replacement.
Wow.
I don't think we're headed into a big recession. I'd say like maybe a mild recession, but it could be a mild recession that lasts for a couple of years, something like that, But the thing that's just hard to predict are like if there's like a war between China and Taiwan or something like that, that would send the world into a recession, that's a possibility. If there's some like big event, but like, and there is a challenge in China right now with.
Shit's scary. The Taiwan China
stuff is worrying.
That was scary.
there is, independent of that, there is there's kind of a looming bust in the property market in China, where there's just been they've overbuilt apartments and buildings in general. There's just too many primary housing units in China, which seems crazy because a lot of people in China, but China has overbuilt primary housing units, and people have speculated on primary housing units, just like the U.S. did in the lead up to 2008. So in the U.S. lead up to 2008, the U.S. was building primary housing units at twice the rate of household formation. So if you're making houses twice as fast as families are forming, then obviously something's got to give. And we're doing that in the U.S. for a while. And so China's been doing that as well, but even more. So that's a correction that's going to happen. But ultimately, the Chinese economy will be gigantic and is gigantic, and will recover from this. But there's going to be probably a temporary recession in China, driven by an overallocation of resources towards construction.
Real interesting country, I have to say. The thing to appreciate about China is just that there's a lot of really smart, really hardworking people there, and they're going to do a lot of great things. This is sort of, independent of Chinese government policy. They're just going to do a lot of interesting things. The thing that will feel pretty strange is that the Chinese economy is going to be probably at least twice as big as the U.S. economy. Maybe 3 times, but at least twice. And that assumes a GDP per capita still less than the U.S. But since they have about 4 or 5 times the population, then it would only require getting to a GDP per capita of half the United States for their economy to be twice the size of ours. And as I'm sure people in this room know, the foundation of war is economics. And so if you have half the resources of the counterparty, then you better be real innovative. If you're not innovative, you're going to lose. So therefore, in order for the US to be competitive on a military level, the innovation has to overcome a gigantic gap in economic output. Okay. So in the absence of radical innovation, the US will be militarily second. Okay.